I invite Padma Desai, who is the Gladys and Roland Harriman Professor of Comparative Economic Systems and Director of the Center for Transition Economies at Columbia University. So, Padma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to refrain from using it because PowerPoint presentation may corrupt me into overstepping my time limit. So I'm just going to talk. There are 4 issues in my view as it relates to the formulation of the financial regulations so far as the United States policy making is concerned. And I'm going to concentrate on the U.S. Regulatory proposals which are emerging from not only from the administration, from the President himself, the Treasury Secretary, and his advisors, but also from the House Financial Services Committee chaired by our very colorful Barney Frank and the Senate committee headed by Christopher Dodd. A variety of actors are playing with almost a sense of drama which we are all observing. So I'm going to concentrate on the U.S. regulatory proposals which are emerging. And there are 4 issues here. The first issue is how does one prevent the excessive risk-taking which was undertaken by the too big to fail banks. They are so big they cannot be allowed to fail, TBTF banks. How can excessive risk-taking be prevented? What kind of rules can be devised for that purpose? The second issue is, and this is what the President himself is hung up on, how to protect American consumers who have been hit badly by the mortgage crisis, enormous bank foreclosures. Not only that, but an effective almost 17% unemployment rate. How do you protect the American consumer from the excessive risk-taking of the Wall Street bankers? The third issue, and this is really the drama, which in my 45 years of living in the United States, I mean, the high point today, as you see it, among the various regulatory agencies in the United States, led by the Federal Reserve, with Chairman Ben Bernanke, and then the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and I can go on naming more and more committees and commissions, but the turf wars in Washington, D.C. today of who should be doing what function among these regulatory functions. That is a drama which we are all watching at the American end and outside America also. And the fourth issue is the House of Representatives has just passed a bill which is called, on December 11, which is called the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Bill of Act of 2009, as if Wall Street can be reformed, but that is the purpose of the bill. And I want to discuss that, whether it can succeed in forestalling a future crisis, which is a task of tall order, but I'll do my best. Now, the problems of the TBTF, too big to fail banks, the enormous risk-taking by the banks, why did that happen? It happened because one set of arguments that the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, which had separated investment banking and commercial banking, was abolished under no less a president than Bill Clinton in 1999. So now the investment banks are also commercial banks, and they have become so large. And maybe should they be broken up? I don't think so. When I went to America almost 50 years ago, I used to watch these enormous trucks barreling along the highways of the United States. Those trucks as big as the length of this auditorium. And do you want to break up these trucks in the United States? Is it a feasible idea? I don't think so. And I think the idea that these banks should be broken up, I don't think it is going to make much headway. They could be regulated, but you cannot break them up. So the abolition of the Glass-Steagall Act was one of the reasons. Then, of course, the use of very complex derivatives like the credit default swaps and the over-the-counter derivatives, which I explained to my students in Columbia classrooms, but which I dare not explain here. And these were the credit default swaps were backed by shaky mortgages, and these instruments led to the financial crisis. So how should they be regulated? And finally, if the banks are risk-prone, then should they be made to keep adequate capital backing to their assets? And here, Francois referred to the Basel Committee of the International Bank for Settlements, which I have been studying the proposals from the Basel Committee, which are sort of starting with definitions and norms. But there is a very prudent wait-and-see attitude on the part of the bank, which I think is worth watching. And the proposals by the Basel Committee relating to capital adequacy. Strict. It has to be common equity, and it has to be retained earnings. None of those cocoa bonds, which are suggested by Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, suggesting that banks can issue bonds, short-term bonds, raise funding, and then there should be a condition attached to the bonds that if you get into trouble, then they should be converted into common equity. That's a condition. And in that case, banks would be desisted from over-borrowing. No cocoa bonds in the Basel Committee recommendations as a formation of capital requirement. They have to be common equity and earnings. There are other conditions, the overall leverage ratio to protect counterparties, which I will not go into. But the Basel Committee is saying we are going to watch the development through 2010, the current year, and then come out with our norms and our ratios. I think that is a prudent position to take. Now, the second issue with regard to the too big to fail banks, TBTF banks, is the moral hazard. If they expect to be saved all the time, then they are going to overstep like teenagers on the American scene who tend to exploit their parents occasionally, right? So moral hazard, how do you take care of that problem? Well, Paul Volcker was almost suggesting, but I don't think anymore, that Glass-Steagall should be brought back. I don't think that is his current position. Cocoa bonds were suggested by Bernanke, not so that they would not grow to be too big. And then finally, the suggestion coming from various quarters to create a resolution authority so that a too big to fail bank can be broken up. This then is the set of proposals for the moral hazard problem. The executive compensation of banks. In the U.S. formulation of the proposals, there's not a desire to sort of bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, or to devise an appropriate tax policy here and now. No, that's not the idea for the compensation caps which are being suggested and implemented by the Pay-Czar Kenneth Feinberg currently. The idea, it's totally political.